and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing an album review by a band who I've been really meaning to talk about in depth on my channel. I've shown them a fair bit in various final update videos but I've never done a kind of full video about them. I'm going to be talking about the new Pornographers today, and specifically their debut album here, Mass Romantic. So I'll just be doing the usual thing which I do in these album reviews, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So as I said, I thought this would be a good place to start with them. This is their debut album, released on the 21st of November in the year 2000. The band are essentially like a Canadian band. They kind of when they formed, they kind of styled themselves as a kind of super group with the slight kind of tongue-in-cheek. Basically, the kind of collective made up of members of bands. Members and musicians from other bands from the Vancouver area, and they formed themselves pretty much for their own amusement. They used, as I said, the term supergroup to describe themselves rather ironically, despite the fact that none of the members had performed to a crowd of more than 200 people. So they kind of the main players in the band are AC Newman, who was a member of bands such as Superconductor and Zumpano. And at the time of making this album, he was working in a guitar shop. You also had Nico Case, who was a country singer and had released an album in 1997 under the name Nico Case and Her Boyfriend, and I think she was probably the most famous out of the lot of them, albeit relative to the others. And then you also had Dan Bijar, who was in the band Destroyer, who also contributed to the album, along with various other drummers, bassists as well, who they all kind of knew, and were in the kind of same kind of social group in the Vancouver music scene. So this record was produced by a guy called David Carswell, and the band's bassist John Collins recorded over quite a long period of 3 years, with the first batch of tracks laid down in 1998, and they kind of they had this kind of four track sort of demo tape, and they were kind of encouraged by kind of their kind of social circle of friends and that to kind of continue working on material, and they basically recorded it in a kind of piecemeal fashion between various other commitments. AC Newman would describe the album as our warped take on what we think a rock and roll record should sound like, and it was as I said mostly recorded with kind of a core band, with kind of Nico Case kind of flying in to contribute between her touring commitments. So upon the album's release, it received widespread acclaim, and it was awarded a Juno Award in Canada for the Best Alternative Album, and Pitchfork magazine ranked it at number 9 of their albums of the year. It continues to be well acclaimed as a kind of one of the best early 2000s indie albums, although despite this acclaim it actually failed to chart in either the US or Canada. So I will just show you my vinyl copy of it now. This is a reissue. It's a 21st anniversary reissue of it here, and I'll just show it here. So there's the front cover, there's the back cover, just with the band members and the track listing. You get a inner sleeve for this one here, which just has it's got lyrics on this side here, and then a kind of write-up of the band, and then a wee picture there. This is on a red vinyl, this reissue, which is very nice. And then you also get a little bonus 7-inch as well, which has one of the album tracks, Letter from an Occupant, which we'll get to, and then two non-album B-sides there. So yeah, very nice little package there. I think this is still pretty readily available. Yeah, came out a couple of years ago. When would it have been? Maybe 2021, I think this might have come out. So yeah, just a box standard reissue of it there. So anyway, I will just now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10, and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So the opening track is the title track, Mass Romantic, which is a really good opener. This is very energetic track, good kind of, very playful kind of keyboard hook on it, and a very powerful vocal from like Nico Case, which is, it's a remarkably kind of fast-paced song, you know, and it's kind of, it really gallops along like this track, and like the way that like she sings it really, really, really well, and like kind of sort of manages to keep up like with like the song, and like gives it like real like momentum. Lots of twists and turns in this one, from that kind of fall to the floor kind of verse, and then this kind of Beach Boys-esque kind of vocal breakdown like in like in like the middle, and then this outro where basically everything cuts out and you just get like Newman's guitar. It really just has a feel of like a power pop classic, this one for me. So an easy 10 out of 10 there.
Want to be upside down, maybe thrown.
Next up is the Fake Headlines. Now this one begins, I guess, as a slightly more kind of softer like acoustic track, but then it does sort of branch off and go in some slightly different directions with a kind of, I think the second verse you got this kind of more sort of chugging kind of like electric guitar like on it, lyrically inspired by something which I don't think we have in like the UK. I certainly was not familiar with it, but like at kind of fun fairs apparently like you can print off kind of like your own kind of newspaper like headline and that, so kind of like so maybe like that's a big thing like in Canada, like I'm not sure, but the kind of like the verse goes like, I wrote the news today in the tent outside the Midway rides, and it's a nice song. This, you got some other nice kind of like lo-fi kind of production elements on it, so it's got this kind of good mix of being both very multi-layered and very well produced, but also a little bit raw like as well. It's still got this kind of feeling like of excitement to it as well. For me, not one of my absolute favourites on the album, a good kind of mid-table song there. Okay, next track up is another one of my favourites on the album. It's called The Slow Descent into Alcoholism, and this one is just a brilliant stomper like off like a song. Great kind of, just all around really well constructed, this kind of fall to the floor kind of glam rock kind of feel to it. Some great backing vocals again from Nico Case. Kind of subverts, I guess, the kind of stereotypical kind of sad kind of alcohol theme songs of and like with like Newman kind of, I guess, recognising himself that kind of like the benefits it kind of brings sometimes, kind of it loosens you up, I guess, and like kind of especially kind of positive effects it can have perhaps someone who is maybe a bit shyer. But, I guess, like, at like the time, I guess, like, some people, I guess, maybe accused him of maybe glamorising kind of like alcoholism and that, but he did say that, he had no audience when like he recorded this song, and it was kind of like, it was just sort of did it for like his own like amusement really, but I think it's a great song. I think you can take it with a heavy degree like of like irony personally. I think it's not supposed to be a serious track by any means, it's just a fun little song there. So for me, we'll get a 10 out of 10, really, really great stuff. Next up is Mystery Hours, and this one was one of the first 4 tracks laid down in late 1998 when they started work on the album. Lyrically, Newman has described this one as a kind of cousin to like the last track, like the Slow Descent like into alcoholism, with kind of lyrics on this one about kind of decay and kind of it paints a picture of a kind of slightly unsettling situation. He sings like, but officers, the rumbling, the sound of the collective crumbling, around the ground, surrender the town. The production on this is very maximalist. It's certainly, whatever the word is for opposite of minimalist is how you would describe this track. A lot going on this one here, this very in-your-face kind of synthesizer and a kind of filtered vocal effect on it. For me, not one of my favourites on the album. I think the chorus, like the Mystery Hours bit, is a little bit on the weaker side. It's not one of their stronger hooks like on the album. It's still decent though. We would give it a 7 out of 10 overall. So okay, next up is called Jackie. Now this one is a Dan Bejar song. Now he was a kind of very much the secondary kind of songwriter like in like the band. Is a very, so I guess the closest parallel like I could draw is probably between sort of Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding, like in like XTC, where Moulding was the kind of secondary songwriter, but also we get maybe say 3 or 4 tracks per album. That's a similar kind of format like to like the new Pornographers. Newman tends to get the lion's share like off the tracks, and then there's a couple of like Bejar songs thrown in, and this is the first one of those on this album, and this one is really, really good. I mean, his tracks tend to be a little bit more wackier, a little bit more like off the wall, but this one is arguably one of the more straight ahead ones like that, like he contributes. It's a bouncy little pop number, this. Good Wurlitzer, like, kind of like piano line, some nice vocal breakdowns on it. There's this great line about like, so like who's gonna start the sunshine. Just sounds great, and it really is really nicely constructed. This is one that Bijar actually had written prior to joining like the new Pornographers. Apparently Newman like was at one of his shows and heard him playing this and kind of thought, you know, this would be a great song to have like in like my band, or kind of like the band like that, like we're going to be forming together. So sort of like he almost kind of handpicked like the Bijar songs like he wanted like included like on like the album. Yeah, just a great song, great chorus like that. Visualize success, but don't believe your eyes. There's a world of wisdom and pain to despise. A lot of great lyrics on this one. Easily my favourite Bijar song on the album.
Behold a strange lady, as if you had.
Okay, next up on my vinyl copy is To Wild Homes, but I believe original versions went into Letter from an Occupant. I'm not quite sure why they kind of swapped them around, but I'm just going with the track listing on this version. So next up is, yeah, To Wild Homes. This one is a rare Bijar and Newman co-write. I don't think they ever really co-wrote songs together, but this is one where it must have just so happened that Newman kind of like contributed like some extra bits and bobs to it. This one is a more frantic song. This one here, it feels a little bit disjointed to me. There's an acoustic break in this, which is an obvious ode to David Bowie's Space Oddity, and it's the only track for me on the album, or certainly one of the only tracks, where it kind of feels like it drags like a little bit, especially towards the end. It just I just like them repeating like that line, to wild homes we run, to wild homes we must go to, like that. But it just gets a little bit monotonous for me personally. It's a 6 out of 10 song. It's okay, just yeah, nothing special personally. But then we flip over my vinyl copy anyway to side 2, and we get Letter from an Occupant, which is, for me, my favourite song on the album, and I think is widely considered their best track, or certainly one of like the new Pornographers' best songs. It's an interesting backstory to this track. It kind of relates, I guess, how the band kind of became known. I guess, like, you know, this was a song which was on their original demo tape, which they sent around various record labels, and no one was interested like in signing them, right? You know, like, so like various record companies, even like the labels that like they were on like as solo artists and like in like other bands, were not interested like in this. Like they just couldn't see like the attraction like with this song. So maybe a couple of months later, like a Vancouver clothes shop that like they used to frequent was pulling together a benefit CD like of artists like who had played like in like the store, and this was one of the tracks like which was on it. And then suddenly, as soon as this benefit CD comes out, a lot of people start asking, well, who is this new band, you know, like who like we've never heard of, like the new Pornographers. And so from there the labels plucked up an interest and decided actually maybe we should sign these guys. Like, after all, it's a great song, this. It's Nico Case lead vocal. It is an absolute showstopper, like, off, like, a song, like, for me, like, and, like, off, like, a vocal performance. Master classic in song construction with a kind of, yeah, slightly angry, angsty kind of verse, making way for this soaring chorus. The drum part just propels the song along really well. Everyone is firing, like, on, like, all cylinders, like, on this track. And it's just a great song. So yeah, this is the highlight on the album, and it's the one to check out. Like if like you're not familiar like with like the new Pornographers for me. Next up is Body Says No. Now this one begins with a kind of very frantic kind of drum fill. Reminds me a bit of the Talking Heads song, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, with this fantastic drum roll and like to kick-start the song. It's got this kind of start-stop like dynamic, lyrically possibly about the idealism of the 60s and kind of psychedelia sort of getting a little bit older, like, and kind of diluted like over time. He says, like, am I repeating myself to tell you dreaming is what's left of psychedelia, caught in the laugh of an outlaw nation, what can you do in the situation? For me, a solid mid-table track on the album, an 8 out of 10.
Ready there, you were ready. to cast.
Next up is called Execution Day. Now this is another Bizarre song on the album, and I must say it's not one of my favourites. It feels quite disparate, this track. It's almost like two songs kind of crowbarred into one, which is essentially like what it is. You know, the first bar is this kind of quite unsettling kind of sort of verse, and then the second bit is this kind of, the chorus opens up and then they all talk, but at the same time lyrically still quite dark, kind of talking about this basically like a kind of like a public like execution. So it's it's very off the wall, very dark, this one. Not one of my favourites personally. It just doesn't live up to the rest of the album. Next up is a Centre for Holy Wars. Now this one is another kind of bouncy kind of like little number, very kind of glam rock kind of stomper, this one. Probably a bit similar to Slow Descent like into Alcoholism. I guess these two songs, if they were kind of sequenced back to back, you might think, that's basically like the same song. But because they're kind of separated like on the album, like they do work, I guess. I guess this one does work like as a separate song, and I think is a really good track. Very catchy chorus, again, great harmony vocals, albeit with slightly darker lyrics, this one, about kind of like, well, I guess kind of wars basically, and that, and it's actually quite interesting that this one actually kind of predated kind of I guess like 9/11 like by like a whole year. Great kind of closing line, hope grows greener than grass stains, kind of like they always end, like they've got a kind of pattern like on this album of kind of ending the songs like with a kind of repetitive line of kind of like one line or phrase, and then what kind of just sort of sums up the song and like kind of becomes like kind of like not quite a motto, but kind of like just like a standout lyric, and they do that on this track like as well. So yeah, The Centre for Holy Wars, a really good track, underrated song like on the album there for me. Next up is the Mary Martin Show. Now this was one of the last songs they recorded for the album, and personally for me it feels a little bit fillery. It's a very frantic rocker, this one here. Basically I think Newman said that he recorded this one because he wanted to have a song which featured a saxophone like on the album, and he thought this one would kind of fit, and yet you have got a saxophone blaring away like on this one here. Lyrically the references to Mary Martin, who's a kind of like sort of like old time like American actress from like kind of like the 1950s and 60s. And it's just kind of been sort of transposed into this kind of mad sort of fantasy kind of chat show setting. So it says like with like your cameras in actions, with your network connections, it's very zany, like, and like off like the wall, this one here, but a little bit long like in like the tooth as well. It kind of it's almost, I think, maybe 3-4 minutes, this one. I think this one would have worked a lot better if they cut it right back to kind of 2 minutes, just because it is so frantic and so like in like your face kind of thing. I think like by the end it does get a little bit too much, a little bit too kind of claustrophobic. Okay, next track up is Breaking the Law. Now this one is the closing track. This is a Dan Bejar song here, originally recorded on one of his own Destroyer albums in I think 1996. This one is a bit of a weird close to this one. It's probably the most stripped back, laid back song like on the album. It just feels a little bit lazy, a little bit like kind of like, yeah, just very laid back, like it could almost kind of fall apart like at like any moment. It's not immediately memorable either, but it's nice enough like when it's on, and I think it's a bit of a funny one because it's not very representative like of the album. It's kind of it does feel a little bit like out of place, but then at the same time I can't imagine this song being anywhere else other than as the closer. So yeah, Breaking the Law for me would get a 7 out of 10 overall. Okay, so overall this album would score 82%, which is a pretty good score for this, I must say. I think this is a strong album generally, so it's a very immediate record as well. Lots of kind of joyful songs on it, very upbeat tracks, kind of power pop like at like its finest, but then some also more kind of zany, more kind of I guess you could say interesting songs which maybe take a little bit longer to like digest, like, and like grow on you. Very much an album of like twists and turns and changes in mood. I'd say it stands quite unique like in like their discography as a record which is quite, it's got a sense of rawness to it and kind of DIY sort of like aesthetic to it. On kind of future albums, they will become a lot more refined, a lot more sophisticated, and like in like their production. But this one does have a kind of feeling of just loads of kind of 20-somethings like in like kind of like their garage, just kind of making stuff up, and kind of just seeing like what sticks really. But I would say though it is a little bit like inconsistent, and this is probably something which I've noticed a lot of new Pornographers albums do suffer from. I don't think they have a flawless album, like every record does have one or two tracks which are a little bit more on the slightly more difficult side, but I do think that is what makes them quite an interesting band. There are moments on this though which are truly like exhilarating, and are just like brilliant songs. So things like Mass Romantic, Slow Descent into Alcoholism, Jackie, and Letter from an Occupant are the easy highlights. But then there's a fair bit of filler, particularly towards the latter half, like of the album, like as well. So yeah, that's been my review of Mass Romantic by the new Pornographers. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed this review. As I said, if you're not familiar with these guys, definitely check them out. This is a good place to start, but it's certainly not representative, I would say, of like their whole discography. They went on like a real journey, and I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, which I'll hopefully be able to talk about like at like a future date. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time for the next one. Goodbye.